Machen's The Virgin Birth of Christ stands as one of the best defenses of the virgin birth in print today, maybe ever. One review of his book is quoted as saying in the British Weekly, "We should wait long for anything fuller, abler, or more readable." Welcome to 315, where we discuss apologetics, worldview, and biblical studies. Just 1 point, 15 minutes or less. I'm Jones Oliver. Today we're starting a conversation on Machen's book, The Virgin Birth of Christ. This is 400 pages of dense, technical writing with the occasional what could be described as a deep dive into obtuse and distracting detail. Furthermore, in Chapter 1, for example, we find a simple block of 40 pages without a subheading or notable road sign to guide the reader. Of course, that deep vortex of detail will finally support and help move forward Machen's thesis that the virgin birth narrative is robust and ultimately historical, but it's going to take some effort from the reader to get there. That said, I do think this text is worth the reader's time and investment. So periodically, I'll plan to drop an episode outlining a chapter from the text. And this way, my plan is that we can slowly work through the entire book. I don't yet have a publishing schedule for this text, but hopefully this will be helpful for apologists, pastors, seminarians, elders, or anyone else who's wrestling through this text. If you're interested in getting a copy of this book, I'll drop links in the show notes for both the book and a free PDF. This one is outside of copyright, so the full text can be found, added to your digital devices free of charge. As for the book itself, it was published in 1930. It's a single volume that pulled from a number of Machen's previous writings and lectures on the topic. As we open the book, Chapter 1, we find that Machen doesn't start with a defense of either the Matthew or the Luke narratives. Instead, he asks the question, did the early church believe the testimony of the virgin birth, and what evidence do we have for that? With this simple question, he asks two additional questions. Do we have an early date for the virgin birth narrative? And two, were there feasible alternative narratives? So where does Machen start? He starts in the 2nd century. And the natural starting point to understand the church's position on the virgin birth in the 2nd century would be to look at the creeds and the writers. Of those 2nd century testimonies, Machen notes the Apostles' Creed, Justin Martyr, his writings of the virgin birth, Aristides, and the fact that he was regarding the virgin birth as a fundamental fact of the Christian faith. Ignatius, Bishop of Syrian Antioch, he was martyred no later than 117 AD, he mentions the virgin birth in many passages, giving the impression, as Machen writes, that in his day, in this case Ignatius' day, the virgin birth was far beyond the reach of controversy. In other words, the virgin birth was neither a late narrative or a story of late origin. Neither was it generally seen as controversial within the church. Machen is trying to show that this was an essential understanding of who people understood Jesus to be. Of course, the question has to be asked, was this narrative on the virgin birth unanimous? And Machen groups those denials into two categories, those of the opponents of Christianity and those by professing Christians. As Machen points out, those by opponents of Christianity are easy to understand. Who could believe in the virgin birth of Jesus, a history-altering miracle, but at the same time deny his claim as the Son of God? But the questions has to be asked, do these opponents of Christianity actually offer evidence of a convincing counter-narrative? Here, Machen addresses the denials from the pagans and the 2nd century Jews, but he also highlights their lack of a historical alternative narrative. But maybe the more interesting group that Machen addresses, what of the professing Christians that denied the virgin birth in the 2nd century? This group, Machen breaks into two categories. The first, suppose that Jesus was begotten by Joseph, and the second, that he was never born at all. Now that second group, that Jesus was never born at all, this is a philosophical position, and though not a Christian view, it's not within the scope of Machen's writing. It's the first group where Machen puts his focus. These tend to fall within various groups. The first, the heretics, which Machen discusses. Then he moves to Jewish Christians who hold on to the wrong view of Jesus. It's here on this second group that Machen falls headfirst into a side discussion on what Justin Martyr meant by a particular phrase in his writing about these Jewish Christians. At the very best, this is an informative but wordy section. At the worst, it's a section that is superfluous and wordy. Next, Machen moves from Justin Martyr's polemic against the Jewish Christians that deny the virgin birth to Irenaeus' polemic against Jewish Christians that deny the virgin birth. It's here that Machen draws back the curtain on some other groups of the 2nd century that have been forgotten by most of us, the Ebionites and the Nazarenes. By drawing in additional information, some from the pen of Origen, we learn that the Ebionites did indeed deny the virgin birth, but the Nazarenes, maybe a subset of the Ebionites, did believe in the virgin birth. Machen then continues on this discussion of these two groups, analyzing the text that they use to establish their understanding of who this Jesus really is. It's possible some will find this section quite tedious. And just in case you were still following along, Machen then addresses recent scholarship on the Ebionites and the Nazarenes. At the end, Machen summarizes this deep diving chapter into 2 points. that chapter 1 substantiates a firm and well-formulated belief in the virgin birth that extends back to the early years of the 2nd century, and that denials of the virgin birth were more likely based upon philosophical and dogmatic positions and not upon genuine historical tradition. So there it is, a quick overview of chapter 1 from Machen's The Virgin Birth of Christ. In the next 5 chapters, Machen will jump into the Gospel of Luke. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for listening. Until next time.